This video is brought to you by BTI Institute, a New Jersey leader in certification-based management training.
And tonight we're going to be talking about how to use story cubes and impediments to help you with sprint planning. And this is an experiment I actually tried with my team. And before I get going, in case you don't know who I am, I'm trying to make it so you guys can see this. So I'm basically Bob Phillips. I'm part of the Agile LCI, which is the local community of interest. I'm also the manager of professional development. And I've been working with John and Nitin. You've probably heard those names in the chapter. Nitin runs the local community of interest, and John is the VP of professional development. And so as part of this process is we set up these discussion groups at the beginning of the year, and we've been recording them. And I've been working in the Agile space for over 10 years, and I have, you know, it's kind of a little bit embarrassing, but I have what you call the alphabet soup of certifications. And I've focused my certifications on the Scrum Alliance side, and I've also focused my certifications on coaching because I really want to extend my reach to other teams. So that's Bob Phillips. And the way we want to run this presentation, if you have any questions, just say something. Your phone may be muted because when you came in, it was muted, so you have to unmute yourself. But I do ask, after you're done asking the question, please mute yourself again to eliminate any background noise. So let's get started. Let me move this thing out of my way here. All right, so what is an impediment? All right, so when everyone in the project management field, they talk about impediments, and I mean, they talk about risks. And in Agile space, people talk about blockers. And so I started thinking, does my team really understand what a blocker is? You know, because basically when you do the daily Scrum, everybody's asked to identify a blocker if they have any. And I started thinking, like, do they really know what it is? And then I kind of peeled that onion back to the next level and thought, maybe if we started looking at the impediments that eventually cause blockers, we could be a little bit more proactive rather than waiting to be blocked. So basically, an impediment, as the screen shows, is basically a hindrance, and it's actually stopping you from doing something. And so some things that you, when you're working on a team, you could be looking out for is that your team might be getting slower. Like things might have been going really smoothly. You might notice that you're having meetings that are taking a little bit longer. That's like one of your first clues. You also might notice if you're following Scrum that work isn't really flowing like it was. Something's slowing you down, something's inhibiting it, and progress isn't being moved forward. And it could be because something's getting in the way. You're not meeting your sprint goals. You're starting to maybe sense pain and discomfort on your team. And that's not good because it really leads to frustration and a lot of time gets wasted. So these are the kinds of things that you should be on the lookout for when you're working with a team. And a lot of times the culprit for these things will be what we call impediments. So when you have your daily Scrum, you know, the typical thing people ask, you know, actually when they give their update is, what did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? And do I have any blockers? That's great. Your daily Scrum meeting should be within a 15-minute time box. There's no reason it should be any longer. What you do, if you find the meeting taking a little bit longer, you need to set the conversations. You need to say, well, maybe we should talk about that after the daily Scrum. And then basically what you do is you say, okay, the daily Scrum's over. And so now if you have a 6 to maybe 10-person development team, they're free to go. And then you can have those discussions. And what you find is even with people being free, they will stay around. But at least you're not you know, making people stay for something they might not be interested in. So things to think about, you know, during the daily Scrum is maybe, you know, one daily Scrum you could have, okay, what's getting in your way? You could have them, you know, answer that question. Another thing is like you could ask is, what's slowing you down? What's preventing you from being effective? And finally, what's blocking you? You know, that's the final question that you would ask for. But those 3 other questions are good to, you know, put in people's minds. So why are they so challenging? A lot of times they're difficult to recognize, and sometimes people might have an impediment depending, like I experienced this quite a bit with my teams in Chennai and Pune, where they don't have the confidence actually to escalate it. They feel that if they say there's a problem, that's they're going to be looked down upon and something's wrong. But in essence, really, there's nothing wrong with teams escalating impediments. What you want to do is find out immediately so you don't get slowed down. What can management do? And this is what you can do when you're talking to your dev team managers or the managers of those or the ones above that, is their job really is to help the team remove impediments. I've heard countless times where they say the Scrum Master's job is to remove impediments, and that is dead wrong. The Scrum Master's job is to help the team figure out how to remove the impediment and help them escalate it if necessary. You don't want your Scrum Master having the team just hand over all their impediments, because guess what? Scrum is about the team learning, and if the Scrum Master solves all their impediments, they're not learning anything. And you ultimately want a team that could actually survive and thrive without their Scrum Master. So you don't want your Scrum Master removing impediments. You want the Scrum Master helping them. And now in the ideal world, if you've seen presentations with me or Nitin, you've probably seen this tree, talking about the Agile world where it's based on the Agile values and the principles and then the frameworks. And in this case, we've been talking about Scrum and then all the different practices. And then basically what this would do is it would drive what you would call an impediment removal organization, where basically you have the teams identifying impediments that they can't solve themselves to the managers. And then if the manager can't solve it, they would then go to their director, and then it would go all the way up the chain until you get to the top. And at each of these steps, the manager might say, hey guys, wait a minute, you can figure this out. And they might push it back. The director might push it back to the manager. And so what this does is it actually enhances the communication and it makes the organization aware. I'm not sure if you were able to attend Jeff's presentation that John mentioned, but Jeff said that he was doing this really critical project, and the business asked, what can they do to help? And John basically said, we need management to help remove impediments. So what they did is they made it very visible. I'm not sure if they used this particular type of board, but what they did is every day they would look at what was new, who owned it, and if it was in progress, closed, or if it was accepted. And this made it so visual that the managers that started owning them got them done. So impediments were being knocked off left and right because the organization was behind it. So that's just something to think about, where for a team to be successful, they can't solve everything by themselves. They're going to need help. So before I get into the different categories, I'd like to open it up to see if there's any questions so far as what I've been sharing. Okay, I know you guys are getting ready to eat turkey tomorrow, but we like these sessions to be a little bit interactive. I guess I'll ask it a different way. Is what I'm sharing helpful? Should I be changing? Should I be doing anything different? I would just like, somebody that might be brave enough to actually give their feedback.
I think it's helpful. Sometimes, people are, like you said, a little hesitant, or maybe they're not confident to bring up and escalate something, and they kind of lean on the manager, where what you just described helps them learn and develop and think and identify, and then where you need to step in and help is good. It helps them learn, because managers we can't do everything. That's why we have a team.
Exactly. That's what the teamwork is what it's really all about. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob, Sunil here. So yes, you nailed it. Most of the people think that the Scrum Master's job is to remove impediments. So thank you for clarifying that. And hopefully I can start working on it in my organization also, telling people that yes, I am there to help remove the impediment, but I am not the only one who has to remove the impediment.
And it takes a lot. It's going to, thank you for being courageous to share that, because when I joined the bank, you know, everybody, you know, I think earlier versions of the Scrum Guide basically said you're the impediment remover, but people have kind of taken that and really misconstrued it. It's more of the Scrum Master owns the process and helps to facilitate the process and help the team grow. And if you're removing their impediments, you are basically not helping them grow. So it's just something that you need to, you know, you need to be there and help them, but you don't want to be the catcher. You know, like everybody's throwing these impediment balls, and you don't want to be that person. And so the next part of this.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
Let me call out some people here. You have some comments here in the chat group from Dora.
Thanks.
Dora, do you want to make a statement? Or should I read it for you, Dora? Okay, well, Dora wrote down that, yes, it's helpful. I'm interested in learning more about the categories and what is classified as an impediment. And then there's also a comment from Tom Mazzoni. I don't know, Tom, you want to share your question yourself? Okay, let me share you what Tom wrote. Tom said, what's the difference between closed and accepted? If a solution is not accepted, can it really be closed?
Let me go back.
You want to tackle those two? The one about the different categories of impediments?
I was just going to get into the categories. That was,
okay, and then
segue.
Also, like I said, Tom had the question about the difference between closed and accepted.
It's just like a risk, where sometimes the business will decide to accept the risk, and sometimes a business might decide to accept an impediment. And closed meaning it's been removed. Again, this is something that I pulled off the internet by Ken Power. He basically did a lot of research in this area, and that's where I picked up the impediment categories that I'm going to be sharing with you next. This board, I wouldn't say has to be exactly this way. It's really what works best for your organization. This is just an idea as far as you know, where to start.
Again, I'm still seeing some comments from the chat, and I'll bring them up later. But again, I want to encourage all of you that are on here, feel free to turn on your microphones and ask the question yourself. And if you're able to, please turn on your camera. We'd like to see who you are. All right, why don't you continue, Bob?
All right, thanks. And thanks, John, for watching the chat, because when I'm doing a full screen share, I can't see it. Okay, now these basically are some impediment categories. I think that was one of the questions in the chat. And what I'm going to do is dive a little bit deeper into each one. And, you know, I'm not going to guarantee to you that this is an all-inclusive list, but these are things that are, you know, you could, once I explain them, you could probably relate to them. So let's get started. The first one is extra features. This is huge. You know, maybe you wouldn't think of extra features as an impediment, but what ends up happening is your team gets distracted from delivering what's really valuable to the business if you keep on adding a feature here and a feature there. Now, yes, Scrum does say that, you know, you welcome change in requirements even later in the process. But what you have to do is you have to have a product owner that understands those changes and if they're going to actually drive business value. Because the more features you add, the longer it's going to take, the more cost the system's going to be, the more you're going to have to support. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. And basically, on each of these, I give you the definition and then basically like how it actually, you know, can be applied. And basically, what this is doing is it's taking time and effort away from the team doing what could be more important. And a lot of times, and if you look at this data, this is from the Standish Group. When you build an IT system, only 36% of the features will be used. So if you think about it, if you get 100 extra features, only 36 of them are actually going to be used. The other, the remainder, 64%, will never get used or rarely used. So, like, you know, that's something to really think about. So that's why this is listed as an impediment, and it's something to be aware of. And I was working with my team, and this was a problem for us. And what we did was we met with our stakeholders every day. We'd be dropping new function every day, and they'd be giving us feedback every day. And then it got to a point where they're starting to ask for the nice things, the really, the things that would really, really, really make the system great. And then we kept on going back and saying, well, let's get something out the door. And then once we get something out the door, we'll focus on those things. And basically, it was that back and forth negotiation, because again, you are supporting the stakeholders, and you have to make sure that what you're delivering them is what they're going to actually use. So the next one is delays. And basically, pretty much self-explanatory. It keeps you from moving forward. And so the way a delay could impede the flow is basically it takes longer to move things through the system. Like, I'll give you an example. If one of your team members needed a database set up, all right? And again, if you have a Scrum team, the team's supposed to be able to do everything, but that's not always reality. You might need like an external DBA to actually do this work. So here you have the potential for a delay, because DBAs are always being pulled on. So you want to basically be able to understand that, and then basically having those conversations with the DBA before the sprint even starts. As you're planning that particular work item that the team is working on, you want to have that conversation so you can avoid that delay, so that the DBA will be available and they will make that database available for development. And so this came from Jeff Sutherland's presentation when he talked about Scrum at scale. And delays are really, really, really dangerous. If you look at this, again, this is from Standish Group, but the success of a project is only 18% if people have to wait more than 5 hours. If people wait less than an hour, the success of a project is 58%. So you could see just with this 4-hour difference how impactful it is. And it is so true, because again, when you're working with a team, their head is in the code, they're really working hard, and the minute you put a delay in there, they start losing track of what they were doing, and they start, maybe doing other things that might not be that important. Next is handovers. Basically, it's passing work from one person to another. And the problem with handovers is it requires more people, and you lose knowledge. That's why they want you to have a feature team when you have a Scrum team, where basically the team can actually handle everything. The minute you start reaching outside your team is when you're going to be having these types of handover problems. And so this is a great picture that really gives you a picture of how things could look if you have a poor project or program manager sitting in the middle between these 4 teams, and then you have your sponsor, an analyst, and an architect basically driving information. And as you can see here, all the communication is being forced through this one person. All right. Ideally, what you want, and again, this is like a way to sell Agile, is you want to have a product owner basically setting the priorities and telling the teams what they want. And then wouldn't it be nice if the teams talk to each other instead of worrying about getting permission to talk to each other, and they would figure it all out. And so 2 things on the bottom of this that's interesting is the decision-making and coordination is all done by this person in the middle, and the dependencies and handoffs are all managed by this person in the middle. And you're actually getting to this state. And unfortunately, you're not going to reach this state overnight. This will take a lot of coaching, a lot of practice, but this is where you want to be. And if you're at IPM Day, I gave out comic books that tell this story. And basically, this is written by like Michael James, and it's all about why Scrum might not be doing the best for your company. So it's called Why Scrum Isn't Making Your Company Very Agile. And if you did a Google lookup on that, you'd probably be able to get the PDF of it. And this basically goes into this picture here as far as where you want to be. The next is failure demand. And basically failure demand, the first thing that comes to my mind would be a defect that actually slips into production. And so that would definitely slow things down, because now all of a sudden the team has to focus on production, because you have real users, so they actually can't keep on building the new stuff. They have to deal with production. And what ends up happening is you lose customer goodwill. You have to go and schedule a fix. You're going to be dealing with support calls. So a lot of this stuff is failure demand. And my team, we even experienced that in the test environment. We broke the test environment because, like I told you, we do a daily deployment to test. And we broke it. And guess what? The customer couldn't test that next day. And we got all these emails. So the team was scrambling the next morning to actually get it, get the problems fixed. So that's why you have to have really good automated testing and all that set up so that you can minimize these opportunities for failure demand. The next is work in progress. It's basically how much work you have going on at the same time. And what they say is, if you have too much going on, you basically would impede your workflow because it's just, there's too many things moving. That's why a good practice would be for your Scrum team to work on one backlog item at a time and get it done and move on to the next. I wasn't a believer in this. At first, I was very skeptical. I didn't think that actually would help. But over time, I found that when the team works on one item at a time, knowledge gets transferred among team members and the work actually gets done, and it actually gets done faster. You don't think it would, but it does. And so basically, this is a Kanban board where basically these are the items that the team's working on. And this Kanban board is tracking to do, in progress, and done. And now, as you can see here, there's a lot of things in progress and there's very few things done. And really, it's not done. PBIA is not done until everything in this in progress column is done, not just one thing. So now, wouldn't it be better if you actually had the team working so that they get PBA, product backlog item A, done, and then start working on B and C, and get B done, and then work on C? That's what you want to drive towards. That's a work in progress impediment. The next one is context switching. And basically, it's when you have your team dividing their attention between things. And a lot of times, I hear these Scrum teams being set up where 50% of their time is spent on this project and 50% of their time is spent on another project. That drives context switching. A way to sometimes reality sets in and you have no choice. But a way to alleviate that would be make an arrangement where your team members would work on maybe one Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, if possible. And then that way they can just focus on the one project and then support the other project on Thursday and Friday. Or do it in the morning for one project and do it in the afternoon for the other. But don't do it to your team members and have them do this constant switching back and forth all day long, because they're never going to be able to focus. And so this will slow you down because it takes time for people to get back into that groove that you might want to say. And so this is a fable that Lisa Atkins shared. She wrote Coaching Agile Teams, and I actually met her when I was going for my coaching certifications. And if you came to the IPM day, you saw my two rabbits that I had set up. Basically, if you chase two rabbits, both will escape. And I don't like reading my slides, but I'm going to read this one. It's amazing what happens when people focus and do one thing at a time. They get it done, pretty much what we've been talking about. Being busy is a corporate equivalent of chasing 2 or 10 rabbits. And this is really important. The Scrum value of focus says, being busy doesn't matter. The question is, what did you get done? And basically, that's really what it's all about. It doesn't matter if you're actually multitasking and doing all these things. What are you delivering? What value is the business getting? So that's context switching. The next one is unnecessary motion, and that's where you're moving things between areas that could be impeding your flow, adding overhead, and basically you're losing information. And again, I'm going to go back to this example that I showed earlier. This is definitely unnecessary motion, if you think about it, where one person talks to the architect, talks to the sponsor, talks to the analyst, and then brings it in. So instead of having all these people trying to communicate with a PM in the middle, when basically the product owner just sets what they want and then have the teams actually go and build it. Again, this is unnecessary motion. And this comes from Michael James. It's a really good read. It takes about maybe 15 minutes to read the comic book. Okay, the next is extra processes. A lot of times corporations feel that they need processes in order to protect themselves, but extra processes cause a lot of waste. If you look at the first value in the Agile Manifesto, individuals and interactions over process and tools. Processes are important, but what you want to drive toward is not having a lot of them, only having what's giving value, only having what's giving, only having a process that's important, that you really have to make sure that you cover. And so basically, this lines up with lean, where basically waste is any action or step in a process that does not add value. Basically, if your customer or stakeholder doesn't want to pay for it, why are you doing it? So, there may be reasons for compliance and things like that, but you should always keep that in the back of your mind. Is what we're doing absolutely necessary? And then the last one is unmet human potential. And that happens a lot, unfortunately, and people show it in different ways. Sometimes if a person doesn't feel their skills are being fully utilized, they'll actually become like a disruptor on your team. And really, it's just because they don't feel like they're being realized. And so what you want to do is provide an environment where team members are encouraged to stretch when they volunteer for the items that they're going to be working on in the next sprint, and stretch and learn, because that's what makes people happy, is the opportunity to learn and actually really feel that you're contributing. So this is something that might be hard to recognize, but usually if you have a disruptive person, this might be the first place that you look. And so I'm going to finish these categories with this Dilbert cartoon, where basically even Dilbert picked it up, where basically they're talking to the manager, and I'm not going to read the cartoon to you. So those are the impediment categories. Is there any questions?
Hi, Bob. This is Obi. Thanks a lot for the for what you have done. Taking a cue from what we had at the last chapter meeting, I just looked at what comments we have right now, and talking about the extra features, I was looking at the fact that it could lead to, a scope creep, like somebody mentioned there, or gold plating in the process. Should we take cognizance of that, or what do you say about it?
I'll touch on it, but we can't go into too much detail because I still have to talk about the story cubes. But the extra features, this is really important, all right? And you're correct that that's also known as scope creep. And that's why if you're following a waterfall project, they have an almost impossible change control process where you have to go through like an act of God in order to get a change in the system, because basically waterfall recognizes that change will cost more time. But on an agile team, what happens is the product owner manages this whole extra features dimension. And so what ends up happening is the product owner will be talking to your stakeholders. They'll see the outcome of a sprint. And then the stakeholders say, well, I'd really rather see something, it do this instead of where we're going. And so then the product owner would go to the dev team and say, hey guys, this is what we want. The dev team would then give an estimate to the product owner and say, well, to do that, it's going to cost you this many points. And then you can translate that into time based on the team's velocity. And then based on that, the product owner has to make a decision. Do they continue working on what they have, what they were planning on, what was in their release plan, or do they actually take on the new features? So it's a give and take. The business has to decide if they want this something new. They have to give up something else because they can't have everything. And that's the power and the beauty of Scrum. And we could go in, if anybody's interested, we can go into a more detailed discussion about this, because this is really important. Because in Scrum, you have what they call a reciprocal commitment. And basically what that means is once a sprint starts, no changes are allowed. And that's where people get confused with the Agile principle, welcome change and requirements even later in the process. Basically what that means is you can change at the beginning of each sprint, but you can't change during a sprint. And that's, a lot of people will really confuse teams by saying, oh, we want this instead. And so what happens is once a sprint starts, you're actually locked down until the team delivers it. The only exception to this rule is if the team is forced to work on a production defect, because that comes first. Production comes first, but otherwise no changes when the team is sprinting. I hope that answers your question a little bit, and I'd be glad to talk about it more, offline or at another time.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Bob, there's a question on the chat from Jeff Thompson, and his question is, what skills do I need to recognize unmet potential?
It's something that you need to be, you have to be a good listener. You have to be able to observe your team, how they interact with each other. And again, to me, I would lead with communication, empathy, understanding, finding out, where everybody is. And I have a couple retrospective techniques that I use to actually find out where people's heads are. And again, that's not the topic of this meeting. But a lot of this is really soft skills. It's not, you can't really, you could read about it, but I can do it only because I've been doing this, pretty much for a long time. I grew up through the project management profession, and then I switched over to Agile, a little over 10 years ago. So it's just really just doing it and understanding how people are and how they're interacting, and trying to stop problems before they start. And then the other thing is you could have the team create working agreements, like how do we want to handle conflict? How do we want to, like I have an example. We had a person on the team that was always late for the daily Scrum. And so the team decided that we're going to start charging. So we started out with $1 and the person was always late. And guess what? We ended up making it $5. And the person was pretty much late. And after about a week, it stopped, because what they were doing was they were funding the team's bucket for snacks and things like that. So it's really for it's the team to manage. What you do as a Scrum Master is you give the team tools that they can use, and $1 was like nothing. The person didn't care. But when we got to $5, that's when it started really impacting. And then the bucket started having a lot of money in it. I was worried somebody was going to steal it, because, it didn't like have 10 or 20 bucks. We're talking like, close to 100. I'm like, whoa. So we quickly, bought snacks and everything with it. But that's, again, it's really soft skills.
All right. Thanks, Bob. There's no more questions in the chat group.
Thanks. All right. Now we're going to talk about story cubes. And again, this is something that I experimented with my team, and these are a really great tool, and hopefully, you'll be brave enough to use them. And because people like telling a story, and I started using it for my retrospectives to actually look back, at the last 2 weeks. We do 2-week sprints, and the team just really jumped right into it. I'm going to show you how this works. So basically, when you do a retrospective, I recommend you having a room where people can get up and move around. And I draw 9 frames. One section's beginning, one's middle, and one's end. Basically, this is the beginning of the story, or the beginning of the sprint, the middle of the sprint, and the end of the sprint. And then basically then, if I'm going to do impediments, I would then take these impediments that we just went over and make them yellow Post-it notes. And so this is where I put a little bit of a twist on the story cubes, because normally a story cube, you look at the past, if you're going to use it for a retrospective, because the retrospective is always the teams reflecting on the past. But I want it to be a little bit different this time, because we were approaching the year end, and we wanted to make sure that we, were able to get our stuff in production. So I said, well, what if we try to figure out what impediments are going to be? You know, what do we expect to happen? So that pretty much that's what we did. So basically, you have your team, and I already explained this. Instead, I said use a crystal ball and predict what the future could look like from today until our next sprint review. So you're setting a time box. So basically, it's a 2-week time box from the day of the retrospective to the next sprint review. I then basically re-emphasized that the story would have a beginning, middle, and an end. And as you can see here, I put dots underneath each one because when I first did this, I didn't have the team member record what they said. And it was hard to kind of come back and really analyze what this was. So now, as they're writing the diagram, they're actually putting bullets down as far as what they're saying to kind of, you know, refresh everybody's mind. So now, these are Rory Story Cubes. They're about $15 a box. I got them on Amazon. And basically, there's 3 types of adventures: voyages, storytelling, or actions. And when you open the box up, you have these 9 cubes. And that's pretty much it. Really, really high quality. It's not, they're not plastic, you know, they don't really feel cheap. They're really nice. So these are the cubes, and what I've done with my team is I started out with storytelling, then we went to voyages, and for this particular one, we chose actions because we wanted to come up with actions and stuff. So basically, since John is now sharing this on YouTube, I have to put avatars on the guys' faces, but here's the box of story cubes laid out on the table, and now basically we have 9 story cubes. So now the team members choose a dice, draw their interpretation of what they saw, tell the next part of the story, basically going in order, and write a few words. So basically, I have these instructions, I go over them, and one thing that you're gonna get is people might not like what showed up on the table. They might wanna switch the images around, but don't allow that. You know, kind of force them to use the images that are on the table. So basically then, the person gets up and draws a picture and puts the bullet points down. And basically this progresses where each person takes turns. They pick up a cube. They could choose from any of the ones that are left, and then draw a picture. And to finally, as you can see here, we're starting to progress from the beginning. So now we're actually in the middle. And this accomplishes a lot of things. It gets the team moving around, and it gets them talking about what happened. And in this case, we're actually looking into the future as far as what they think is going to happen. And then basically this is just showing the team members telling the story, going around, and now we're basically getting near the end of the story. And here you can see my Post-it notes that I had up there for them to identify the impediments. And then that basically now we're just about at the end. So now we have the whole story being told. Does this make sense to everybody? Do I need to clarify anything? Because what this is, it's almost like it looks so simple. You know what I mean? But people really enjoy this stuff. I got the reputation of having the most fun retrospectives, and I get a lot, and I get a lot of good press. So now, here's where you actually tie it all together. You would then take these impediment Post-it notes and have the team members put a Post-it where they think there could be a problem. So basically, what they did, they had I think it was 9 or so impediments, and they put some problems at the beginning, possibly something in the middle, and then what could happen at the end, and that this basically is unfinished work. So this is where they identify the impediments. And so I take pictures of this, and you could actually see this if I was actually be able to zoom in on it. I used my iPhone for taking the pictures, and it's great. And everything I do, I have pictures. As you can see, I take pictures of my team doing it. They don't mind. So here now are 3 areas that actually there's 4 impediment areas. So now the next step is you write down what they say as far as what they think is going to happen. All right. And so now you're saying, oh, this is really ugly. So then what I do after the retrospective is I actually make it a little bit neater, and I wrote in the beginning, they identified extra features, delays, as far as being a problem. In the middle, context switching. They felt that they were going to be asked to, do this and do that. Because a lot of times when we have those daily calls with the stakeholders, we want to jump on that if there's like a problem with the data or something. And then basically at the end, they wanted to see, what they were saying work in progress. So basically, here's where we identified the impediments. And then from there, from those impediments, you get the team to agree on these action items. And so basically, these were the 2 action items that we came out of the meeting. Focus on getting clear requirements for backloading and bonds, basically because that's what they saw causing a delay. Get the business and bond reports daily because they weren't doing that. And understand how the diary tool is being used, because a lot of times they're saying, well, it's done in a diary tool, and our developers had no knowledge of that. So they felt this is something that we could actually do. And then basically the next one was maintain focus and avoid multitasking to remediate the context switching impediment. And this one I've been living with for quite a bit, and I'm really trying to help the team whenever they start, losing focus and trying to do too many things. And I do that by looking at, we use a Kanban board. I'll look at the Kanban board and I'll say, hey Ed, you got 3 things in progress. What's going on? How come there's 3 things in progress? My rule of thumb is I let people have 2, because sometimes they might start something and there might be a delay, so that it's okay to get something else going. But once you start seeing more than a person doing more than 2 things, that's when you might have a context switching problem. So pretty much this is a picture of a retrospective that we had 2 weeks later. And they were totally amazed. They felt that what they thought was going to happen happened. And then from there, they identified action items that we're going to be actually working on this upcoming sprint. So that pretty much is a summary of how you use story cubes to identify impediments. And hopefully you also got a little bit of knowledge on how to use story cubes to actually do a retrospective where you could actually, because what it is you set the duration. You say, okay, we're going to look back at the last sprint. In this exercise that I shared with you, we were looking 2 weeks ahead, but normally when you use these, you wouldn't be looking 2 weeks back. And then finally, I want to say thank you. This is the PDU code, and that you would use to get 1 PDU. It's also, this session is also recognized by the Scrum Alliance with 1 SEU for learning. And here's the contact information for Nitin, who could not make it here tonight, and myself, Bob. And with that, I'd like to open it up for any questions.
How much of a stretch was it for your team to utilize the cubes and relate it to the Scrum?
It was so natural. I was a little nervous at first. But I'm known to. Let me stop sharing so I can see people's faces. I'm known to keep people kind of thinking and a little bit, because I do unusual stuff. So this is something that they would feel was something Bob would do. I did a workshop called Build Your Own Scrum, where basically I gave people construction paper and all the different Scrum events, artifacts, and roles, and they actually had to paste it on a piece of paper, and they liked that. So I thought having people drawing it would be good too, and it was very natural, not a problem at all. What you need to do is really explain up front how to do it, and also enforce that rule where you can't change, because the first thing they want to do is not use that image that's on that cube, but that's the whole point of it. And the thing you need to emphasize is, and what I found my team to be, they got nervous because they thought they were going to get the image wrong, because they were going, well, what's this? What's this? And I said, it's your interpretation. If you tell me this ball is a beautiful tasting cherry, that's what it is. So it's really, when they're drawing the image, whatever they want to call it, so nobody's wrong. It's not threatening at all.
Got it.
Sunil, you made a comment. You want to turn on your mic and share that with everybody personally?
Yeah, sure. I believe this December 11th event, it is a hybrid event really. So I think in 4 locations all over the world, the people can physically join in and interact with the other people. I believe Jeff Sutherland is going to join from location in Amsterdam, Netherlands. Here in New York City, there is a location. One of the 4 locations is in New York City. I believe it is New York Design Center, if I remember correctly. So it is a real hybrid event. It is virtual, but there's an opportunity to physically, face-to-face interact with fellow professionals too.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that. I signed up as a remote person because I thought I'd get more out of it rather than having to travel to New York City. But that's definitely, if you do Google that, you'll see all the information. It gives you the actual address of where it is in New York. Thank you for clarifying that. And it's only $49. That's amazing for 4 hours with Jeff. You know what I mean? It's really, if you use that code. And I think the code expires on December 1st. I think that, and it's, you know, the full price is really not that bad either. $79.
$79.
And along with that, you get a book. You get one of Jeff's books. So, you know, it's like, okay, you're going to buy a book anyway. So, you know, might as well get a course too.
There
Any
are
other
no questions in the chat group, Bob.
Okay. Let me see. Where are we at? So I started any take back discount of 50 if one is already registered. It depends on when you registered. I don't know how that would work because basically right now it's in the late registration phase. This one was covered. Okay. Did we cover that enough? Extra features and gold plating? That's always a problem. But it's what if you really use Scrum right and you really, you know, use the engine the way it's designed, you can get the product owner to make the choices. Because if you're driving toward a release, like, you know, right now our product owner wants this thing put in production by the end of the year, so we can sunset like $500,000 worth of external tools that we're using. And so you keep on reminding the product owner saying, okay, we can do these things, but we can't do these other things. And so it's that whole trade-off. And you basically, you know, you do that as part of sprint planning. Thanks, John, for clarifying that comic book. Is there any other questions? Because we're one new question. Okay, Rajan, if I pronounce your name correctly, say something if I didn't. What failure demand is when you have a defect, and when you're working with a Scrum team, you really want to drive high quality. And a lot of times, if a product owner is new to the process, the first thing they'll say is, you know, this team is humming along. Again, this is not a session about Scrum, so I'm going to say things that I'm assuming people know about. Let's say their velocity is 50, and they looked at their backlog and they see that in order to get everything done in their backlog, because they actually built a release plan. And, you know, maybe this is a future session where I could take you through how all this works. You could see in the release plan that they're not going to get everything they want for 6 months based on the current velocity. So the first inclination is the product owner say, hey, can you guys speed up? And being good developers, they'll say, sure, you know, we'll speed up. And I actually lived this. So you know, this is real experience for me. So basically, we pretty much sped up. We started hitting 80, 90. Oh, the whole world was happy. Guess what? they were bypassing quality. They were just basically doing stuff and saying it was done without all the necessary automated tests and all this. So we suffered heavily. Yes, we did increase our velocity to 80, but like within a couple of weeks, when all these things caught up to us, our velocity was down to 30 because we were spending all our time fixing defects. And if you do velocity right, you don't count points for fixing defects because that's actually a defect in the process. You only count points for new work. You do reserve capacity when you're doing your velocity. Like say your team is at 50 points. What we did is we took one person out of development to do production support. So basically, those 50 points were that the team working along with one person doing production support. Now, what happened with all these problems was that one person doing production support couldn't handle it. It was too much. So the way our team was set up is the production support person say, "Hey, I need help." So you pull more people off, and that's why our velocity started going down. So that's a lot of your failure demands are going to be due to poor quality, and that could be really easily avoided. You can also accelerate. My team productivity has doubled or even quadrupled following Jeff's basically hyper productive team pattern. It's basically it was part of the presentation that Nitin and I did earlier this year, where we actually took you guys through the pattern, and all that is actually posted on the PMI website. So it does work. I wasn't a believer, but you can maintain high quality and also work faster. It really is possible, and that's why I really enjoy working in this space. Did I answer that question about failure demand, or is there more we want to dig into?
Okay, Jeff asked me a question about the book, and I'll tell you what, the best way I'll do it is I will grab a copy of the book and I'll show you guys how it looks like. It looks like this. All right, this is a comic book. All right, so now it's recorded, so it'll also be when you can look on YouTube. So it's called "Why Scrum Isn't Making Your Company Very Agile." This is the book that that Bob was referring to, and it's by a gentleman says MJ, and if you open it, his name is actually Michael James.
Michael James is a Scrum trainer. Basically, the way Scrum Alliance works is the only people that can certify Scrum Masters are CSTs, Certified Scrum Trainers. He's been doing a lot of work with Jeff Larman. That's why on the back of the book, it talks about it has less. Basically, he's a proponent that's a scaling methodology. Jeff talked about Scrum at Scale. There's SAFe. Actually, PMI just bought Discipline Agile Delivery. So that's going to be something coming into play. So that's what's exciting about this space is there's always something new to learn. And it's not like a methodology for scaling would be one size fits all. It's more of what works best for you and your company and your teams. But this book tells a great story, and that's why I brought it up.
Okay, two other things. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just kind of address these things in the chat group. There was a question here about the slides. Again, the slides will be posted onto the PMINJ website. So you have to be a member. You have to log in to access the slides. However, we will be posting this recording as well as all of the, we're in the process of putting the past recordings onto YouTube too. So you can watch it there, or you can, again, go to our website for that. One other question that also popped up, Bob, is that Jeff Thompson said he Googled Scrum around the world and came up with 15 results, but none of them looked like a class. Can you address that one?
You have to do the entire, the only way for it to work is you have to, let me bring that up. You have to do Scrum around the world - a hybrid event. I did the same thing that you tried, and I got a zillion things. But if you do Scrum around the world - a hybrid event, it'll come up on the first page. And if you are not able to find it, just send me an email, and I'll send that register. I could share that with you. Also, John, I don't know, you're going to be sending out an email for the survey. I don't know if you want to include that or not. I could
Well,
share
why don't you do this? Why don't you share your screen of your search? That way everybody will see it and it'll be recorded here.
Okay, now you're going to test me. Okay. All right, sure.
Yeah, just share your Google search screen that you found it.
It looks like somebody posted a link in chat too.
Oh, okay.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, the email was handy, so I just took the link from my email.
Alpesh and Sunil both posted a link there. If you go to the chat group, you can get the link there.
All right, and actually, it's even better than it was this morning. Let me share my screen. I did the Google search just now, like John suggested.
Yeah.
And
Or I mean, if you want, I can click the link and I can share my desktop for what it pops up.
I gotta share it.
Yeah. Okay.
I did Scrum Around the World, a hybrid event, and basically it's right there. But you won't get that discount code. I got it because I was on an email list from Jeff that you could probably sign yourself up for as well. It comes under Scrum at Scale events as well. So basically, I think you'd get it under the first link or the second one.
Okay. All right. Well, Jeff Thompson said that worked. I don't know if it's the link from Alpesh or Sunil or you're sharing your screen, but okay.
And that's what this whole community is all about. If you don't wait for Nitin or me or John to send something. If you see something that looks interesting that you think the rest of us will, share it with us and we'll get it on the next discussion group. That's what this is all about. And I don't think I'm only sharing things that I have access to and what I'm interested in, but I'm sure there's a bunch of other stuff that's available. But really think about that global Scrum gathering. Now's the time to talk to your company because it's amazing. They're here in New York. I mean, it's really cool.
Okay, we're at 7:01 p.m. now, and there are no questions on the chat group.
All right, so with that, I will stop the recording.
Well,